See, to live is to suffer. To survive, well, that's to find meaning in the suffering.
Welcome to your Daily Strength Coach podcast, episode 17, When to Push. Hello and welcome back to your Daily Strength Coach podcast. This is Mark speaking as per usual. Today is the 15th of July 2015. Today's question was put at the bottom of episode 16. Comes from Michael Cowan. How's it going, Michael? This is what I thought was a fairly good question. Certainly an interesting one I'm kind of looking forward to answer, because I think it's one that doesn't really get answered so often. Question that, as most mindsets of an athlete is to push yourself to your limits, to reach your goals because you want it so bad, but then there is people telling you slow down, don't overtrain, don't grind anything. It feels like I can push myself harder. What is your thoughts on the subject, pushing yourself to your limits or being more conservative? Cheers, PS for powerlifting. I think this is a reasonably clear-cut answer. You can only, before we kind of get into this, it's probably be a good idea at the end of this podcast, you go and have a look at general adaptation syndrome. It's a topic. You just look at the Wikipedia, you'll get an idea of it. Look at fitness fatigue theory. Again, just the Wikipedia would be enough. And look at supercompensation theory. Those are three kind of underpinning theoretical models between the exercise stressors and the global physiological adaptation that comes after that. So basically, if you put the body under a strength stress, it gets stronger. You put it under a fitness stress, it gets fitter. You put it under like a heavy lactate stress, it gets better at dealing with lactate or operating under a heavy lactate based, like heavy lactate environment. The general idea though is fitness fatigue is the one you probably really want to pay attention to. It's probably the most sophisticated of the three. Let's say you start at X level of fitness. Let's say you can bench press 100 kilos. Now let's say we do 100 kilos for 5 sets of 5, 3 days a week. Oh wait, that'd be ridiculous. Let's say we're at we do a cycle where we go 60%. So we do 60 kilos for 5 5s 3 times a week. We do 70 kilos for 5 5s. We do 80 kilos for 5 5s. Week 3. Week 4, we do 85 kilos for 5 5s. And we start to get to the point where we're pushing the limits of where we can go with the sets and reps progression. Reps start slowing down. You become overly fatigued between workouts. You find that maybe your chest is seizing up during working sets. You're getting cramp in between sets, or maybe after the workouts you're feeling tired, sluggish, chest is really sore after workouts. You basically get to the point where you're fatiguing yourself. So if you were to go back in the gym after that week and try a 1RM, chances are you might actually do worse than that 100 kilos, even though you've probably made a strength gain. Because you've pushed for the last 4 weeks with such volume and intensity, fatigue is now masking your performance, is masking your fitness. You're overly fatigued so you can't perform. So you need some time to recuperate from that training load. So you take a light week, 2 light weeks, and then you do a peaking cycle. Maybe like you take an easy week, maybe you go to 50%, or maybe you drop the volume to like 50%, 30% for a week, and then you come back up and you do like heavy triple, heavy double, heavy single, frequency of 1 time a week, heavy triple week 1, heavy double week 2, heavy single week 1, and then you hit a new 1RM PB. Say you hit 105, 110, in that time, you have managed to realize a 5 or 10% gain in fitness or strength. For powerlifting, fitness is strength. Maximum strength is your fitness level, or is your mark of fitness, or your mark of success, if you will. So you need to understand kind of the relationship between exercise, stress, and recovery before you can really gauge how hard you can push, how hard you can't push. What you can't do, and what you it's definitely not a good idea, is to push to your maximum capability every time you enter a gym. Depending on your level, if you're a lower level lifter, you're not as experienced, your training age is a bit less, maybe your training age is reasonable but your performance is less, you've been training within yourself for quite a while, and you engage in a program where you basically take a weight, try to get it to 10 reps, and then once you get that weight to 10 reps, you pump it up 5, and every workout you're trying to get that weight to 10 reps. I guarantee you will get stronger. You will get stronger faster than you would do on most programs, bearing in mind if you're in the correct training state for this. However, on a long enough time frame, you're either going to dig yourself into a hole where you're going to find it extremely difficult to get out of, or you're going to end up hurting yourself and end up with an overuse injury. So you need to push yourself in the correct frame, the correct time frame. Now, you'll look at some lifters and see their programs where they appear to be lifting heavy all the time. These lifters will either be on a steep build-up to a meet, where they've been kind of holding off for a while or focusing on different lifts, and then they have a meet coming up, so they've either worked backwards and they know they've got to hit these numbers on this day to be where they want to be in 10 weeks' time or whatever. So they might set out a 10 RM, 8 RM, whatever, and each one of these is a personal best because they're building up to a 1 RM personal best. So that person's either been taking it easy for quite some time, and they've targeted out their cycle, they've targeted out their 10 RMs or 8 RMs or 6 RMs or 4 RMs. They've targeted out their workloads to know where they want to be in that 10-week time frame. It's a 10-week time frame, and then they go back to like easier training. Now, an example of this would be Bill Kazmaier speaks to this in a DVD that he recorded in like 2002, 2003, where he says for the World Championships, if he wanted to break this world record, he'd have to lift this weight in training for these sets and these reps, week 10, blah, 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 blah. He would work backwards and he would know what he needed to hit, when he needed to hit it. But when he wasn't in the build competition, he would do 5 sets of 5 at 70%. And we would sit at that level fairly habitually, unless he was in like a shorter period where he was building up to a meet. What else you'll get is lifters who are enhanced. Like they'll be on certain levels of PEDs or steroids for a time frame, and they know within that time frame they can push, and they can push hard, and they'll get results. However, when they're not doing that, when they're not taking those things to produce those gains, they will come off them, and they will have to lift within a more conservative frame, because they won't be able to shift the weights they can when they are doing what they're doing. So psychologically it's not great for them. They can get hurt trying to lift at the intensities that they can lift on when they're off, like I said, when they're on versus when they're off. So you'll see a lot of guys on the internet who are doing that sort of thing, lifting heavy all the time, but then they're doing other things that I'm not doing, and presumably you're not doing either. So if you sit in you kind of, where you want to get to is you want to get to a space where you can work with infinite time periods. So you need like a loading cycle you can run over and over again. Doesn't need to be anything majorly difficult. For example, you could run within the same sets and reps paradigm. So you can use a very good cycle that I've used before and used in the past, and kind of took off some of like Mike Stone's work. Is you do what you call a concentrated load. So you do a 5x5 week. That is done at a very heavy intensity, so it's a 95 to 100% of what you're capable of, like a heavy intensity. So basically on the cusp of what you can handle for 5 sets of 5 in those movements. Then you do a 3 sets of 5 week. done a medium heavy intensity, so that's about 85 to 90% of what you can handle for 5 reps. Then you do a week of 3 5s at the same intensity that you worked on in the concentrated load, so 95 to 100%. And then you do like a 3 set of 5 workout where you work at 100 to 105% of your 5 RM intensity. So you'll effectively be setting a 1 to 5% personal best in that set and rep scheme. And then you move on to like an 80% load week of 3 5s. That's your deload week. So you get like a volume overload at the start, and that digs you in a hole for 2 weeks. So what you do is you reduce the volume, you reduce the working load for 2 weeks, creep it up, and then on that third week, and this is based off work with weightlifters that Mike Stone did, you'll find that your testosterone levels will peak in that third week. So that's the time to start pushing heavy in the gym. So that's an example of a loading pattern that's based off physiology, where with those exact workloads, and we will get that result. Another way of doing it would be some of the cycles that I've put up. Current cycle I'm running, week 1 is 3 sets of 10 at 50% or 60%. 3 sets of 10, 60%. Say week 2, 4 sets of 6 is 70%. Week 3, 4 sets of 6 is 75%. Week 4, 4 sets of 6, 80%, and week 5, you'll do a 3s workout on the first day with 85%, and then you'll do a 6s workout with 85% for 3 sets. And then you'll come back down to the 60% or the 50% week. And that's a similar sort of idea, where you're doing the 10s is a bit of a preload, dig yourself in a bit of hole with volume, become lighter for a period, kind of learn to move the bar fast with lighter weights, get good technique, get in a good rhythm, and then as you climb up to the 80 to 85% week, then you start pushing your levels of strength. That's when you're going to have to start digging in for your sets. But hopefully the front end of that block means that you're prepared for the end of that block. So, like, there will come a time when you run 4 or 5 blocks in a row where you're going to miss some reps. Maybe you've got the increase a bit wrong. Maybe you increased by 5%. We should increase by 2.5%. Or maybe you need to switch to a more volume-based training period. But like that kind of cyclical way is a way of elongating that training process, that sort of 10-week training process where you're training aggressively towards a goal. Another way of doing it is to take like a coasting block where you work between 60 to 70% with reasonable volumes, 5 5s, 4 6s, something in that kind of bracket. 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 6 reps. And you can run that for blocks of 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and then hit up a more open-ended block. So another very good cycle that I've used, this is kind of one I'd probably use more with athletes, is 5 5s at 70%, 5 4s at 75%. Oh, sorry, I started that block too late. 5 5s at 75%. You can rep out on the last set. I wouldn't rep out with athletes, but it's something that lifters can do who want to train more aggressively. 5 4s at 80%. Again, athletes wouldn't rep out because they don't want to introduce fatigue into the legs, whereas a lifter will rep out because they're training aggressively towards a new level of fitness, so they're pushing. So 5 4s at 85%, and you do that final rep out with 80%. And then 5 3s at 85%, again repping out on the 3. And what you'll find, that'll be a real tough block, but you'll get real sharp gains with it. Now you can run that block over and over again. That was a program that I released to the public last year, and lots of people got really good progress on it. And some people like absolutely smashed up strength levels. Some guys doing reps of 10 with their 2 or 3 RM. They started like within 3 or 4 blocks of that training cycle. Other guys didn't really get anywhere with it. Some girls didn't get anywhere with it. Depends on your training background, where you're coming from, but that kind of training can produce like some really marked gains in progress. However, if you run it over and over again, you're going to run into a hole like we spoke about beforehand. You're going to get injured. So the answer is there's a mixture. That you need to know when to push and when to pull. When to push, when to push and when to pull is probably a good way of putting it. When to push yourself and when to pull yourself back. I like to have, I think a good way of having this, having a coasting period, a push period, a coast to push, a coast to push. So you can work off a 3-week block where you go 5x5 rep out, 5x4 rep out, 5x3 rep out, and then 60 to 70% or 50 to 70%, however light you want to go, of 3 weeks where you're just getting quality work in, more reps, more volume, move the bar well, and then come back into another kind of sprint block. And that way, you're just elongating that process a little bit. And the more you elongate the progress, the more successful, the better. The longer you keep the upward trajectory going, the higher you're going to finish. Like, you can go vertical real quick, but you ain't going to go vertical for very long. Gravity's going to catch up with you eventually. You might get 4 or 5 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is. Gravity will catch up and you will fall. You'll dig yourself into a hole training like that. I guarantee it. I guarantee you that. Whereas if you elongate your progress, you're much more likely to get 12 months, 15 months, 16 months, 18 months progress with that same program, and you're going to end up in a much higher altitude of strength. A pretty shitty reference, but you'll end up in a much better place doing that kind of training. So, Michael, hope that answered your questions. Probably a little bit long for this broadcast series, but I thought it was a fairly interesting question and one that I feel doesn't get answered very well. So I hope I've done it a bit of justice in this podcast. That concludes this episode. Questions, please, if you have any, put them down below in the comments section. Send me an email, speedpowerperformance@gmail.com. Drop by the website, castironstrength.com. Online strength coach is going to be online some stage. But the podcast is going. It's going fairly well. Until next time, tomorrow, this is Mark, Castor, your daily strength coach podcast. Signing out. Goodbye.
Different phases, like mazes, to find my way. And now I know that happy days are not far away. If I'm strong enough, I'll live long enough to see my kids. And when something more constructive with the time.